Hello everybody. So welcome to our today's video, and today we will be talking about shading. So what exactly shading is? So shading is basically you turn your 2D drawings into 3D one by adding some values in it. Now what are these values? The values are known as shadows and highlights. So there are two types of highlights and different types of shadows when you give values to the object or your drawings. So shading is basically taught on a sphere, and it's probably too mainstream, and everybody does the same thing and teaches the shadows on the sphere or cube or cone, and it's probably too mainstream and boring. So I've made a new way. I made a chart, and let's see if we can learn the same thing in a new way. Yeah, let's start. So I'm writing down the topic of shadows. Shadows, there are different types of shadows, and there are two types of highlights. So let's start with our shadows family. And the first shadow we have here is cast shadow. Now the cast shadow is the darkest part in the shadows family or in the shading. Okay, so the cast shadow is where there no light is passed. Okay, not even a single point is passed in the car of a light in the cast shadow. Okay, so basically when the light falls on the object and the shadow which is fallen on the surface is known as a cast shadow. Okay, so now I'll color the cast shadow part. So it's probably the darkest part, and you gotta make it uh, super dark, yeah, with your any pencil, whichever pencil you're using. And you make sure that you don't overdo of the lines when you're drawing the cast shadow. Okay, make sure your shading is soft, no lines are seen. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. The next part we have is core shadows. Now core shadows are a little bit lighter than the cast shadows, and basically there is light passing, but that doesn't mean it's not black. Okay, the core shadows are the ones which forms the curves or which forms the shape on the object. So basically core shadow gives your object a 3D form, and probably one of the important thing to understand in this shading family or shadow family. And it's probably the best thing in the shading part. Yeah, so if you the more best you execute this part, the more good your drawing looks. Now the next thing we have is midtones. Now midtones, you can probably guess it, the middle part of the shading. And yeah, but it is not the close from cast shadow, it is close from core shadow and highlight. Okay, the mid part in that between those are known as the midtones. The midtones are probably the hardest one to draw or to shade. Okay, so you gotta have a lots of practice for this. Now let's see the highlights. Now the highlight is basically the lightest part where there is 100% of light on the surface. Okay, no, not even a single point of pencil should be there on a highlight, but it depends upon what are you drawing. Now highlights, I'll give you a small tip on the highlight. I usually do little bit of shading on highlight even if there is 100% of light. So I like to keep it in that way, so that's my style. So you can do that thing, but the more softer your subject is, the more softer your highlight needs to be, and the more harder or more sharper your subject is, the more sharper your highlight needs to be. So the more sharper you're going to make it, the more the more sharper it looks. Like let's take an example of a steel, a blade, or a sword. So the more sharper the highlights are going to be on that stuff, it's going to be best. So it's going to be look probably the best and sharpest. And the next is the reflection light. Now reflection light is usually you probably can't explain it in this box form, whatever it is said. So I'm just probably doing some shading on the top of the box and leaving some few space over the bottom of the box. So reflection light is basically when the light goes on the surface and reflects on the object. Okay, so it's usually on the lower part on your objects, lower parts, yeah, close to the core and cast shadows. Now if you see, we mix this box together. If you take the reflection light aside, okay, don't count it in. I by mistakenly counted it in with making that design. Okay, so if we just mix all these box together, we will get a value gradient. Now what value gradient is? The value gradient is like you're going from black to white, and there are different colors in between which comes from black to white. Now this thing can be done in color also. So the coloring stuff, if you take a red color, so the first thing will come the darkest red, the second thing will come a little bit light red, then the more light, and the white at the end. Okay, so right now I'll show you the value gradient in the black and white form. Okay, now my first box will be the darkest part, the cast shadow, the super dark part. Now the second part will be little bit lighter. Okay, it will be not as dark as the first one, and I'll try to keep it balanced between the super dark and little bit light. So this is the one of the best practice to do the shading practice. Now coming on to the third and fourth box. Now the third and fourth box are probably the important one, and you have to practice a lot for that one. And you have guessed it right, it is the midtones. The third and fourth box are midtones, and this part is probably yeah, as I said, it is the hardest one. So you gotta practice a lot for that one. So keep comparing your value gradients from the previous boxes. Make sure that they don't look same. And the last one is the highlight part, and as I said, I like to do little bit shading on the highlight one, so it's not totally white for me at least. Now I'll be drawing one object, one small object, and I'll be doing the time lapse of it, and meanwhile in that we will do some revision of the shading. So let's begin with our revision. So the first thing we learned was cast shadow. Cast shadow is the darkest part of your shading. Second one we learned is core shadow. Core shadow is the shadow which forms curves on your object, which gives 3D value to your object. Third one is we have is midtones. Midtones are the one which are middle part between core shadow and highlights. Now the next is we have is highlight. Highlights are the one which are where there is 100% of light on the surface. And the last one we have is reflection light. Reflection light is where the light reflects on the surface and goes back to the object, and usually it comes on the bottom part of your object. Now that you have learned the shading, you can probably guess out where the lights and where the shadows and what types of shadows are. Let's comment down below in this video where are the lights and shadows in this drawing, or you can just screenshot this and point out where are the lights and shadows and send me on Instagram, and we can discuss this thing on there. And if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content, and let me know in the comment section what you want to see next. Until I see you next time, bye bye.